Welcome to Whispers in the Dark. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and check out the amazing products in the description. Now enjoy the story.
I used to think I knew every inch of Enfield, Illinois. I grew up here, in this small town where everyone knows each other's name, where the cornfields stretch as far as the eye can see, where the night sky is filled with stars that the light pollution of big cities has long since erased. But now I know I never really knew this place at all. I never knew what truly lurked in the shadows that envelop our town when the sun goes down. My name is Daniel Hayes, I'm 34 years old, and I work as a maintenance technician at the grain processing plant on the edge of town. Nothing in my life prepared me for what happened those 3 nights in October. I'm sharing this story not for you to believe me, honestly, I don't care if you do or don't, but because I need to talk about it. I need someone else to know what I saw. It all started when my old dog, Cooper, a 12-year-old Labrador, went missing. It was starting to get cold outside, the leaves had already begun to change color, and Cooper wasn't one to wander far from home, especially at his age. When he didn't show up for food after my night shift, I knew something was wrong. The next morning, I made up some flyers and put them up around town, but I already had an odd feeling. Enfield is a small town, and lost pets usually turn up within a day or two. Someone always sees something. But when I asked around, no one had seen Cooper. After 3 days, I decided to search the woods on the edge of Old Man Mercer's property. It's a big stretch of land, practically abandoned since Mr. Mercer died 5 years ago. His kids never bothered to sell it or do anything with it, so nature started reclaiming what was rightfully hers. The property borders the Little Wabash River, and I figured Cooper might have gone down there for a drink and maybe gotten stuck somewhere. It was a Saturday, and I had the whole day off. I set out shortly after sunrise, taking a backpack with water, some sandwiches, and a flashlight in case I was out late. I spent hours calling for Cooper, whistling, and searching for any sign of him, any tuft of fur or paw prints in the muddy patches near the river. Nothing. As the day wore on and the sun began to dip, I decided to take one last look in some of the abandoned structures on the property before calling it quits. There was an old barn, some equipment sheds, and the pump house down by the river. It was when I approached the barn that I noticed something strange. The door, which usually hung askew on rusty hinges, was pulled completely shut. And there was something else, marks in the packed dirt in front of the barn that didn't look like they were made by boots or tires. They were almost like footprints, but with a pattern I'd never seen before. 3 distinct impressions, as if whatever made them walked on 3 legs. Now, I'm a practical guy. Always have been. I don't believe in ghosts or monsters or any of that stuff. But I stood there, staring at those weird tracks, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. There was something wrong about them, something that felt unnatural. For a moment, I thought about just leaving, going back to town and maybe returning with someone else. But the thought that Cooper could be trapped in there, maybe hurt, made me push on. I pulled the barn door open slowly, and it groaned on the rusty runners. The late afternoon light spilled through the opening, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The inside was dim, and I had to wait a few seconds for my eyes to adjust. The barn was mostly empty, except for some old hay bales and some rusty farm tools. No sign of Cooper. I was about to turn around and leave when I heard a sound coming from the back of the barn, where the shadows were deepest. It was a soft scratching sound, like claws against wood. My first thought was relief, it had to be Cooper. I switched on my flashlight and pointed it towards the sound. What I saw wasn't my dog. It was something I couldn't immediately process, something my brain tried to twist into something familiar, a bear, maybe, or a feral hog. But it wasn't either of those things. The creature was partially hidden behind a hay bale, but I could clearly see its eyes, 2 bright pink eyes that seemed to reflect my flashlight beam in a way no animal eyes should. When it realized it had been spotted, the thing made a low sound, almost a growl, and then it moved. It was only when it moved that I realized just how wrong it was. It sprang forward in a quick, fluid motion, landing on 3 thick legs, 2 in front and 1 in the back, like some bizarre tripod. Its skin was a sickly gray color, hairless, and its head was oddly shaped, with small ears on top that reminded me of a rat's. Its arms were small and atrophied compared to its powerful legs, ending in something that looked more like claws than hands. I stood frozen in fear. The creature was less than 15 feet from me now, its glowing eyes fixed on mine. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, could barely even breathe. The whole situation felt unreal, like I'd stumbled into a nightmare. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the thing leaped again. Not at me, thank God, but sideways, towards a gap in the back of the barn I hadn't noticed before. It disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the echo of a strange sound, something between a moan and a high-pitched shriek. I didn't wait to see if it would come back. I bolted out of that barn as fast as my trembling legs would carry me, stumbling back across the property towards the main road. I didn't stop running until I got home, where I locked every door and window before collapsing into my chair, trying to make sense of what I'd just witnessed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room with all the lights on, a loaded shotgun across my lap, thinking about what I'd seen. Part of me wanted to believe it had just been some kind of deformed wild animal, maybe a bear with some kind of genetic condition or disease. But I knew, deep down, that wasn't it. What I'd seen wasn't natural. It wasn't of this world. The next morning, I was exhausted and on edge, but I forced myself to make a decision. I needed to go back there. I needed to be sure. If that thing had done something to Cooper, I needed to know. And more importantly, I needed to make sure it couldn't hurt anyone else. I called my friend Mike, who's a cop with the Enfield Police Department. I didn't tell him the whole story, just said I'd seen something weird out at the Mercer property and needed some help checking it out. He agreed to meet me there after his shift. We waited until the late afternoon to go, and I'm ashamed to admit I was grateful for that. The thought of going back to that barn in the dark was more than I could stomach. Mike brought his service weapon, and I brought my shotgun. I explained that I'd seen a strange animal. I didn't mention the 3 legs or the glowing eyes, and that I was worried it might be dangerous. The barn looked different in the daylight, less menacing, but I still felt a knot of dread in my stomach as we approached. The door was open again, swaying slightly in the breeze. The weird footprints I'd seen the day before were still there, but now there were more of them, going in several directions. Mike looked at the tracks with a skeptical expression. He asked what kind of animal I thought had made them. I didn't know what to say. We went into the barn together, our weapons ready, and searched the place. There was no sign of the creature, but we found something that made my blood run cold. In the far corner of the barn, where I'd seen the creature disappear, there was an opening leading to some kind of dugout underground passage. And scattered around the opening were bones, dozens of them, some obviously from small animals, others larger and more disturbing. And amongst the bones, I recognized Cooper's red collar. Mike was visibly shaken. He said we needed to go back to town and report what we'd found. He talked about an official investigation, bringing in more officers. I agreed, but as we turned to leave, I heard that sound again, the high-pitched moan the creature had made before. It was coming from outside the barn now. We hurried outside, and there, not more than 20 yards away, was the thing. In the daylight, it looked even more wrong, even more impossible. Its gray skin seemed almost translucent, and you could see dark veins pulsing beneath it. It was crouched on its 3 legs, its small arms twitching, and its pink eyes fixed on us. Mike swore loudly beside me and raised his gun. The creature reacted instantly, launching itself towards us with incredible speed. Mike fired twice, but the thing moved in a strange, erratic pattern, almost like it could predict where the bullets were going to go. Before either of us could react properly, it was almost on top of us. I fired my shotgun at the last possible second. The blast threw the creature back, but to my horror, it was on its feet again almost immediately. There was a wound in its torso where the pellets had hit, but instead of blood, a dark, viscous fluid oozed out. The thing made a horrible sound, a shriek of rage that sounded like nothing I'd ever heard, and then it bounded away in a series of rapid leaps, disappearing towards the river. Mike was pale and shaking. He didn't say anything for a long time, just stood staring at the spot where the creature had vanished. Finally, he turned to me. I'll never forget the look on his face, a mixture of fear and utter disbelief. Without a word, we started walking back towards our cars, both of us in a state of shock. On the drive back to town, Mike broke the silence. He said in his 15 years as a cop, he'd never seen anything like it. He asked what I thought it was. I had no answer. We talked about reporting the incident, but we both knew how it would sound, two grown men claiming to have seen some kind of monster out at the old Mercer place. No one would believe us. We decided Mike would report that we'd found evidence of a dangerous wild animal in the area. He'd warn people to stay away from the property until wildlife officials could investigate. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was the best we could do without sounding like lunatics. That night, I couldn't even try to sleep. I sat on my back porch, staring out at the trees in the distance, thinking about what I'd seen. I remembered stories my grandfather used to tell, stories I'd always dismissed as just old wives' tales to scare kids. He talked about a creature that lived in the forests around Enfield, something that was neither man nor animal, something that hunted at night, and that had 3 legs so it could move quickly through rough terrain. At the time, I'd laughed at those stories. Now, they filled me with dread. The third day was when everything got worse. I got a call from Mike in the middle of the afternoon. His voice was strained, and he was speaking in a low voice. He said something had happened. 2 local kids, the Parker brothers, had gone missing while riding their bikes near the Mercer property. Their parents had reported them missing when they didn't come home for dinner, and a search party was being organized. I met Mike and other volunteers at the community center, where the sheriff was coordinating the search efforts. Groups were formed and areas assigned. Mike managed to arrange for both of us to be assigned to the area near the river, close to where we'd last seen the creature. We started our search immediately, even though we knew daylight was fading fast. There was an urgency that couldn't be ignored. 2 kids were out there, maybe lost, maybe something worse. We walked through the property, calling out their names, checking every shed, every thicket, every place they might be hiding. It was when we were close to the river that we found the first bike. It was lying on its side at the riverbank, as if it had been dropped in a hurry. Not far away, we found the second one. And between the 2 bikes, we saw the tracks, those same strange 3-toed prints I'd seen before, only now there were many of them, leading off into a denser part of the woods. Mike radioed in, reporting that we'd found the bikes and were following a trail. He didn't mention the strange footprints. We followed the tracks cautiously, our flashlights cutting through the deepening gloom. With every step, the knot in my stomach tightened. We had our guns ready, but after what I'd witnessed the day before, I wasn't confident they'd be enough if we encountered the creature again. The trail led us to a small clearing, and in the center of it, there was an entrance to what looked like a natural cave or maybe a very large burrow. The smell coming from inside was horrific, a mix of decay and something chemical I couldn't place. The tracks led straight inside. Mike and I exchanged a look. Without a word, we both knew what we had to do. Those kids could be in there, maybe still alive. We couldn't wait for backup. We went into the cave together, our flashlights leading the way. The smell grew stronger, almost unbearable. The passage was surprisingly large, allowing us to stand upright as we moved forward. The tunnel sloped downwards, growing colder and damper the deeper we went. After what felt like forever, but was probably only a few minutes, the tunnel opened up into a larger chamber. And it was there that we saw something that will haunt me for the rest of my days. In the center of the chamber was some kind of nest made of branches, leaves, and, my stomach churns just thinking about it, animal parts and other materials I couldn't identify. And in the nest, there were not 1, but 3 of those creatures. 2 were smaller, possibly younger, but they had the same basic look, 3 legs, gray skin, glowing pink eyes. The third was the one we'd seen before, larger and obviously older. And next to the nest, bound with what looked like some kind of hardened secretion produced by the creatures, were the 2 Parker kids. They were alive, but clearly in shock. The creatures noticed our presence immediately. The two smaller ones scuttled behind the larger one, which rose up on its 3 legs and let out that same blood-curdling shriek I'd heard before. Then, without warning, it lunged towards us. What happened next was a blur of action and panic. Mike and I both fired almost simultaneously. The larger creature was hit multiple times, staggered, but kept coming. It was only when I aimed my shotgun directly at its head and fired point blank that it finally went down. The smaller creatures squealed and huddled deeper into the nest. We rushed to the kids, cutting the strange bindings with our pocket knives. They were too scared to speak, but didn't seem physically harmed. We scooped one up each and ran back through the tunnel, expecting at any moment for the smaller creatures to come after us, but they were apparently too busy mourning their fallen leader. When we emerged from the cave, other members of the search party had arrived, drawn by the sound of gunfire. We handed the kids over to the paramedics and tried to explain what had happened. Our words came out jumbled, our descriptions incoherent with shock. I doubt anyone really understood what we were trying to say. The sheriff organized a team to investigate the cave, but when they went back there a few hours later, they found nothing. No creatures, no nest, not even the body of the larger creature we'd killed. It was like it had all vanished, or like it had never been there in the first place. The Parker kids eventually recovered enough to talk, but their stories were confused and contradictory, as you might expect after the trauma they'd been through. They spoke of a 3-legged monster that had chased and captured them, but most people put it down to overactive childhood imaginations fueled by fear. As for Mike and me, the truth is we were subtly discouraged from talking too much about what we'd seen. The sheriff, a practical man, suggested we'd probably just encountered some bears deformed by industrial toxins or something similar. He made it clear that stories about monsters would only cause unnecessary panic in the community, especially after the scare with the kids. So we stayed quiet. What else could we do? With no physical evidence, no bodies or photos, just our word against common sense and logic. Over a year has passed since that night, and there have been no further official sightings of what I now think of in my mind as the Enfield horror. The Parker kids moved away with their family to Indiana shortly after the incident, and the Mercer property has finally been sold to a development company that plans to clear the land for farming. But sometimes, on particularly dark nights when the wind blows off the river, I think I hear a distant sound, that same high-pitched moan I've never been able to get out of my head. And I wonder if those two smaller creatures are still out there, somewhere in the woods and fields around Enfield, growing, waiting. And I wonder when they'll show themselves again.
We've reached the end of our story. What did you think? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. Don't forget to follow the channel, like the video, and check out the amazing products in the description. And don't miss the next video, you're going to love it.